Hi, my name is Alexandra Parr. I will be talking to you guys about the California wildfires of 2007. A little bit of background as to why I chose this topic. I'm actually a Southern California resident. I wanted to learn a little bit more because I was pretty young in 2007, but I do remember some of the effects of these fires. As far as, I was in one of the counties. We weren't evacuated, but we did have fire days. So we were out of school for 3 to 4 days. So that's why I was really interested in this topic, and I want to go ahead and start. So if you want to see this, actually, this first photo was taken by Wally Sockley, and I want to say it was in the Ponderosa County. So this was just one of the many pictures that I found, just showing a little bit of insight. So this is about wildfires. It was an extreme or a severe fire weather event from October 21st to 31st of 2007. It was across 13 counties. They included Amo, Buckwheat, Canyon, Coronado Hills, Grass Valley, Harris, Magic, Pumacha, Ranch, Rice, Roca, Rosa, Santiago, Sedgwick, Slide, and Witch. It was declared a state of emergency by the governor at the time, which was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the president, which was George W. Bush. If you look on the left side, I included an image taken from a NASA satellite that shows kind of the sheer immensity of these fires and how you could actually see it from that far above. So these were some pretty serious fires. So the event impacts and response, CAL FIRE estimated the cost expenditures to be about almost $93 million. This was $30 million over the expected amount. And I think it was probably because they didn't expect it to be going on for so long. There were about 3,000 homes and structures that were destroyed. I also included some statistics as far as the injuries that firefighters sustained. So in total, there were about 140. There were 17 fatalities, 8 in Harris County, 2 in Witch County, and 7 others after the fire siege. So I assume that it's probably, in hospitals, and was probably due to the extent of the injuries. There were 900,000 residents displaced, and it burned about 517,000 acres. So this number, actually, I found some conflicting reports with. I've seen some others say that it was over 600,000. So I think it's safe to assume that it was between 517 to 600,000 acres. So that's still a lot. Not quite as accurate as I would have liked, but it's a good amount of acreage. This image on the left-hand side was from the California Siege Report of 2007, which is where I got the majority of my information. It was very, very thorough, written by CAL FIRE. But it kind of just shows some of the final burned areas, which of those areas were urban, where were the major roads, and then it also divides by the counties, which was helpful to see. But yeah, definitely take a look at that report if you want more information. It's very, very thorough. So some of the local key players, the emergency responders, of course, emergency medical services, dispatchers, medical staff at the local hospitals, obviously firefighters and police officers. Yes, local law enforcement, police officers were very important in executing these mandatory evacuations. Also, something that's often overlooked are animal shelters. In times of crisis like this, there are displaced animals. Pets are so important to people. A lot of these fires took place in very grassy rural areas, and so there are a lot of horses and bigger animals, and so it was really important that these animal shelters were able to take in these displaced animals as well. Local assistance centers, or LACs, provided financial and temporary housing information assistance. So that was also very important because, as you saw, there were 900,000 people that were displaced or evacuated at least. Local news and radio stations were keeping the community informed and calm. And of course, community emergency response teams. Some state and federal key players: the California Governor's Office, California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, aka CAL FIRE, Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, NASA. They were able to share a lot of the imagery technologies with California, which was very helpful. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, and Department of Homeland Security. Some of the ICS roles. So one area command team, or 5 people per team to provide communication and coordination assistance for several fires. So there was only one of those. There were 4 Type 1 incident management teams, which had 20 people per team. And this was used to establish effective firefighting organization and develop tactics and strategies for containment. So this was a very good group of experts, or several groups of experts to help with the containment issues. There were 31 crews, which included 25 elite fire hot shot crews. And these firefighter hot shots are the ones who are trained to handle extremely difficult and hazardous incidences. So there were 31 crews of that. They also had 90 fire engines with support from 22 strike teams. So there were 110 people total for the strike teams to work directly on the fire lines, as well as the equipment, which was 11 water tenders, which support fire and aviation activities, 11 heavy air tankers to support the ground firefighters in attacking fires, 14 medium and heavy helicopters to assist the ground firefighters with strategic pinpoint drops on identified areas of the fire, as well as 6 bulldozers to establish the line to halt further spread of the fire. So all of these equipment pieces were obviously manned by people in the industry, so firefighters. So there were, countless firefighters that were involved in this. So important. So the immediate public health response, obviously there was the community recovery, just like kind of the initial, let's get things going again. Collaboration was incredibly important between all of these different agencies, federal, state, local, and NGO groups. If it weren't for volunteers and donations, people would be probably still hurting now. But volunteer and donation was incredibly important, as well as communication, as we kind of briefly spoke about the emergency phone calls. This fire was well known for the reverse emergency phone calls that went out to about 200,000 residents to inform them that they needed to evacuate immediately. Telephone banks, free internet in some areas for victims. I remember personally our household getting an emergency phone call, but it was to kind of just remind us that this is what's going on and you might need to evacuate, so kind of get your things in order. Post-fire, FEMA gave California $147 million under the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program between 2001 to 2007. This was able to buy firefighting equipment in order to prevent future fires from escalating to this level. FEMA also gave about $5 million to Californians in need of rebuilding their homes that were actually destroyed. The Department of Homeland Security provided $1 billion to help states and cities improve communications, interoperability, and this was incredibly helpful, especially during these wildfires, because it's so important to be able to communicate well on the ground. And a lot of the first responders did comment on the smoothness of communications and interoperability due to this gracious gift of funding of $1 billion. The community preparedness evaluation during the fire, I thought it was pretty spot on. They had quite a bit of supplies readily available: food, water, bedding, personal items. Several companies did actually aid in providing telephone banks for free calling, including long distance in the United States and Mexico. These fires did span almost to the border of Mexico, so you can imagine that there were a lot of relatives that were actually able to be in touch because of this. Large video screens to stay informed, as well as high-speed internet stations, and obviously donation centers set up by the American Red Cross. Not only that, but many major roads were closed. This kind of limited people from going very many places, or at least going back to places that were engulfed, which is important. Nearly all public schools and universities in the areas were closed. I remember that. I remember having what we called fire days. Not so much because we weren't evacuated. I mean, if we were, we would definitely not have school. But because of the air quality, I remember the ash being so thick, it was pretty bad. So we were inside. Many businesses were closed as well. According to this statistic that I found, more than half of California's businesses were located in 7 of the 13 disaster counties, and this was just a year prior to this event. So, there was quite a bit. I mean, it was kind of just everyone was on standstill. 2 days into the fires, approximately 500,000 people were evacuated from 346,000 homes, and this was a mandatory order. This is what the police officers were there for. They were there you need to leave. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it was the largest evacuation in the region's history. And a lot of these residents, as I was saying earlier, were notified of the evacuations via the reverse 911 phone call system. Community preparedness evaluation post-fire. So there were several things that were very helpful. Number one, mental health personnel was available. They were able to monitor the toll that the stress of this entire event was having on evacuees. Not only that, but the state and local public health officials were extremely helpful in offering free flu shots because it was flu season. And I don't think it could get much worse than having the flu and being an evacuee, so this was good. Temporary housing information was also available. Not only that, but CAL FIRE and the U.S. Forest Service conducted a study of aviation response during these fires. So this was just accounts written by air tactical group supervisors, lead plane pilots, Bravo units, and air tanker bases during this time. This was a report that will help to help with reviewing operational procedures. Sorry about that. Not only that, but the National Response Plan was updated prior to the fire by the Office of Homeland Security and FEMA. So this was put into effect during these fires. So there are still some studies and reports going on to evaluate the effectiveness of these updates. And they will be published and distributed by FEMA. Some changes. So because of this fire siege, there was the Blue Ribbon Commission Task Force that was created. This helped with jurisdictional and operational barriers, training, interstate, regional, mutual aid systems, local building planning and land use regulations, brush clearance and fuel modification, as well as communication, interoperability, information technology, and public outreach improvements. So this was really just a task force to see what can we do to help and improve on these things that are obviously necessary for emergency response. The Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center helped with fosters collaboration, policy training, and equipment needs. So again, these were just some different groups that helped to hopefully improve on the firefighting front. And here are my references. As I said, you can definitely get most of the information from the California Siege Report of 2007. It was incredibly helpful. And I hope you enjoyed and learned something.